Let me start with the scenario. So I'm just going to ask, do we have the mics to hand? The roving mics. Okay, so I'll start with the scenario just because I want to hear people's feedback. Okay, this is a hypothetical. Going to keep it simple. Imagine you're going on a cruise. It's a cruise for a holiday. It's a nice one, a fancy one. It's a big ship. It's nice and modern. You're going away for a fortnight. It's all inclusive. Let's say it's 5 stars. You're in a junior suite. What do you expect from a cruise? How do you expect this experience to be? What should it be like? You're on a fancy cruise. You've paid a good bit of money. What do you expect? Lottery. Lots free. Luxury. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, it would be great to get the mics when we can. Luxury. Okay. Thank you, Andre. You expect luxury. What else? First class service. That was good. What does that mean? Anything you want. Okay. Anything you want. What else? Hospitality. Sorry, we're having trouble with our mics. Hospitality. Good food. Okay, good activities, excitement, entertainment. Okay, so we expect to be well served, good food, luxury. Everything should be nice, and it should be kind of what we want and kind of how we want it. Okay, let's imagine you're on this cruise. Everything's going great. It's really nice. You hear a massive noise. You don't know what that was. It's a massive noise, and you feel a little rumble even. There's a slight shaking. What do you think? What's the first thing you think? And what do you do? What do you think? I think we're coming with the mics. I think they're coming. What do you think? Big noise. You don't know what it is. And there's a little rumble. Thinking, somebody said the ship's going to sink. Somebody said you're thinking lifeboat. Okay. Anything else? You want to find out what's going on. Okay, because you wouldn't know. You don't expect that to happen. All right, so I'm going to move along. I'm going to say the first question, but I'm going to change the scenario a little bit. Instead of a luxurious 5-star cruise liner, I think a mic is coming. Let's say you're young, you're fit, for whatever reason, you've signed up to the army. You've joined the Royal Navy and you're about to go on your first ship for service. You're in the army, you're going on a warship for service. What do you expect it to be like? You've never been on one before. What do you think is coming? You're in the army and you're going on your first battleship. What do you expect? Nobody knows? What do you even guess? Raise hands. We've got the mic.
I think what would be going through my head, am I going to come back home? Am I going to die?
Okay.
I think you will feel like fearful of what is about to happen because you don't know. It's an unknown.
Okay.
So you will be fearful.
Okay, fear for your life. Okay, what else? Everybody must have some thought. What do you think's going through your head? What do you think it's going to be like? Okay, somebody has something to say over here.
Challenging.
Okay, it's going to be a challenge. Anything else? You're scared, and it's going to be a challenge. Those are most of our thoughts, it seems like. Okay, same thing again. You're on this battleship. Massive noise, slight rumble. What do you do, Steve?
I don't know, but I think, I hope at that point I would be praying.
Mm-hmm.
And giving my heart, giving everything to God and asking Him to protect me.
Okay.
I would need protection from God.
Okay. All right. Praying? Anybody else? You're in the Navy. You're on your first ship. There's something's gone wrong. What do you do? Sorry. Brother
Check if
Moses.
the lifeboats are in order.
Check the lifeboats and that they're in good condition. Okay, good. It's kind of similar responses, actually. I wasn't sure I'd get that, but okay, interesting. It's kind of similar responses. Very different scenarios, but when something goes wrong, something goes wrong. Of course, in one of the scenarios, when you got on the ship, you kind of expected that was more of a possibility. Is that fair to say? Yes? Okay, all right. Let me go into, I'd have someone read 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Just raise your hand, someone who has it, and then just read that for me. First Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Anybody who's willing to read it? Okay.
Be sober, be ye also patient, subdue yourself, hearts for continuing of the Lord dwelling. Be ye sober
Okay.
and be vigilant, for your adversary the devil is as roaring lion, walketh about seeking who he may devour.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that text is fairly self-explanatory. What is that? Just in a few words. What does that mean? Sorry, if we could get the mic over here. Just raise your hands for me.
Anyway, be aware.
Be aware.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Be aware. Okay. Who's ever been to Richmond Park? I think it's in southwest London or west. Anybody? I see a couple nods. Okay, do you know what it's kind of known for? Say it louder. Deer season. Just for those on YouTube. Give it to me again, Steve.
Dear season.
Deer season. Okay, so I've been there for the first time, I think, a couple of years ago. It's filled with deer, just big deer, just wandering around, herds of deer. And you can kind of get close to them, and they'll just look at you and kind of go about their business. If you keep walking closer and closer, eventually they get a bit wary, and they start kind of, just giving you the eye, generally being like, what do you want? Why are you getting so close? If you keep getting closer, then they walk away. They don't necessarily run, they just trot off as if, okay, we want our space. You've gotten close enough. If you ran at them, they might run. I don't know. I've never seen that. What do you think happens in the wild? If you're in a random forest where it's just natural wild deer, they don't see people on a daily basis. If a person walks up to a completely wild deer that isn't used to people, what do you think that deer does? How does it react? How do most natural animals react? Okay, so we got one here.
I think he would get very aggressive.
It'll get aggressive. Okay, aggressive. All right. Any other response? Deer that, and this is right. These are the ones with the big horns, but they're also just the little scrawny ones. Just any deer completely in the wild. Could get aggressive if it sees a human. Have you ever seen either a documentary or even a film where there's a deer and someone's trying to be quiet and they step on a twig? What normally happens? Let me raise your hands. Let me hear some answers.
They would scamper away.
They scamper away. They run at the slightest sound. They don't even have to know what it is. They're gone. Why? What's the difference between these two groups, the wild ones and the ones in Richmond Park? Why, with some, you can kind of walk up to them, the others, tiniest sound, they're gone?
The ones in Richmond Park are accustomed to humans. The other ones are not.
Absolutely. One group is accustomed to unusual things that could be a threat, but generally speaking, it probably isn't. The other ones, they know anything and everything is a threat. Okay, so we're going somewhere with this. We remember the two scenarios I just brought up. The first one was what? Luxury ship and a warship. And the second one was what? Deer. Raise hand, shout out, so they can hear you on YouTube as well.
Deer, I would say.
Deer, okay. And the two groups, and their difference was?
One is accustomed to things that might be dangerous, but they don't see it that way, and the other is not.
Absolutely. Why would I bring those up in light of today's lesson? And this is for everybody. Go ahead.
Because our life at times is like that. Sometimes life is good and sometimes trials come.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts? Life is good and bad, trials will come. Any other thoughts? Why would I compare a luxury cruise liner with a battleship and deer in Richmond Park and how they react versus deer in the wild and how they react? Any other thoughts? No. Well, what was the main thing when you would get on a luxury ship versus when you get on a battleship? What was the main difference?
I see one as you're going for enjoyment. The other one is life or death situation.
Right. One is enjoyment, one is life or death. So therefore, your expectations are quite different, right? Your expectations. And the lesson generally is about what? This week in particular. Feel free. Go ahead, Mother. Feel free, everybody else, to get involved
I
as
said
well.
be aware, be on guard.
Say that again, sorry.
To be aware or be on guard because you
To
don't
be
know
aware
what's
and
gonna
to be on guard. Has anybody ever heard the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Or if there's a loving God, why do bad things happen? Quite frequently. And fair enough, God is all good, God's all powerful. Why is there so much suffering? In light of the first scenario, in fact, in light of both, in light of the first scenario in particular, if you pay good money to go on a cruise ship, you're expecting luxury and relaxation. If you're in the army and you're getting on a battleship, you expect conflict, you expect challenge, you know you're headed into war. If something happens to a cruise liner, you're surprised and you're probably confused. If something happens to a battleship, hopefully, depending on your training, your experience, etc., you rush into action. It may be a surprise, it might not be. You're going to war. You know there's an enemy out there and you know they're coming for you. So people at war don't necessarily ask, why are there people shooting at me today? On the street, you should ask that. You don't expect that in normal everyday life. In war, you don't ask, why did something bad happen? You're probably grateful every day something bad doesn't happen because you're at war. Your perspective is so different that even when the same thing happens, you react to it totally differently. Likewise, looking again at 1 Peter 5, verse 8, when we look at the deer, one of them is used to something that would normally be a threat being around it all the time. So it doesn't really react to it anymore. The other one reacts to anything and everything. The other one reacts to everything as though it is a predator. It treats everything like a roaring lion. The first group, any human walking up to it, if they wanted to do some harm to it, they could do a lot easier because their life is such where the roaring lion, the predator, isn't really a thing. So in our lives, we have to wonder our responses. Do we actually believe there's a roaring lion hunting us every day of our lives? And if so, how do we react whenever we see threat, whenever something touches us or grazes us. Is life, are we here to coast along, have a good time, earn money, have kids, be happy? Are those things bad? Or is our main purpose about something bigger that encapsulates all of that? In which case, bad things needn't be the surprise. They're actually supposed to be the norm. But it's just great that they happen as little as they do on an individual basis, hopefully. Some people seem to have a worse time than others, but your perspective decides how you react to it. Okay, let's look at the 4 main reasons why there is suffering. And the lesson touched on them. They're pretty much the days of the week. What are the 4 main reasons bad things happen, particularly to the Christian? Why we go through suffering, why we go through the crucible. And the lesson describes what a crucible is. It's a thing where you can put stuff in to test it or put it in under severe conditions to purify it, to see how it reacts. That's all a crucible is. So it's talking about us being under severe conditions. What are the 4 main reasons why we go through severe conditions? And it was in the lesson. One of them we've touched on already. It's to do with the deer and what that pertains to, and who Satan is. Don't feel shy. Did most of us do the lesson? It was literally the titles of the lesson.
The first one in the lesson is the attacks of Satan, so like Job.
Okay,
first
great,
one.
thank you. Satan, he's specifically hunting you down. The roaring lion is prowling. He's looking for prey. He's looking for food every day. So that's one reason why we suffer, because somebody is trying to make us suffer. Okay, other reasons. Again, there were days of the, just raise your hand if you have an answer. There's 3 more that are referenced in the lesson in particular.
Is one of them choice? Like Samson, he chose to disobey everything that he was supposed to stand for and did the total opposite.
Very good, correct. One of them is we make decisions, sometimes wrong ones, bad ones, and there are consequences to those. Okay, there's 2 more. The next 2 seem kind of similar, but they have specific reasons. 2 more reasons why believers go through suffering, why God allows us to go through suffering. 2 more. Okay, if we just raise your hands and we'll have the mic come to you.
I was thinking lack of faith.
Okay, lack of faith, that could be one.
To purify.
To purify.
us.
Okay, and we'll come back to that as well, but that is one. And there was a last one. It's kind of linked to that. Consequences of sin. True, we've kind of done, I would link that to our decisions. The sin is, yeah. There is another one. It's kind of linked to purifying us. It's in the later half of the lesson. Yeah.
It talks about maturing us as Christians.
Okay, thank you. So, number 1, Satan. He's hunting us down. Number 2, consequences of our decisions. Number 3, to be purified from sin. Number 4, to mature us in our relationship with God. And you could say that is teaching us or forming our characters. Let's look at number 1. I'll see how quickly we get through these and which ones I eliminate. Okay, a question that we may also get just from an everyday person who is just genuinely interested in why we believe what we believe. If God is all powerful and all loving, how come Satan can get us at all? The roaring lion, why is he even allowed to touch us or get near us at all? Was the first cause of suffering for Christians, and not necessarily saying this happens, they're not in order, I'm just choosing the order that the lesson has put them in. The first cause was Satan pursuing us. Why is he allowed to? Why does God let him near us at all? Okay. We'll get, thank you.
It's all down to choice. God doesn't send Satan after you, but he allows him so that you could choose which side you want to be on. Because God doesn't force you to be on his side. So he allows you to choose which side you want to choose.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And from someone different, that was a great point. Why is that important? She said it's about choice. God allows you to choose what side you want to be on. Why is that important? Why does God need to let us choose? Thank you.
Because Satan has always said to God that he puts a hedge around us, that we don't have free will to do what we want. And so therefore, we are protected by him. So therefore, God allows us, as Malvia says, to make our own decisions so that we could either choose to serve him or choose to serve someone else.
Okay, great. We have another answer as well. Thank you, Michelle. We have two more. One's from Andre at the back with our brother at the front.
Yeah, I think, Pielo, you asked the question, if God is all-powerful, why does he permit Satan to wreak havoc and tempt us and put us through difficult experiences? One reason is because there's a controversy going on and there's a bigger picture. And other worlds are watching what is happening and saying, does Satan have a point? So there's part of the explanation why God allows the consequences of evil to manifest themselves and us to be tried in our experience.
Right, absolutely. While the mic is coming up, that's an important point Andre just mentioned. Satan did initially accuse the Father, and that is part of the definition of the old Hebrew word for Satan, of being basically a tyrant.
Point covered.
Okay, he was going to say the same point as well. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Linked to that, we've seen that God lets us make our own decisions, and that's important to him. Satan says, no, you don't have free will. And God says love means giving you freedom to choose between me out of love. But we make the wrong decision. Why does bad stuff have to happen? Can't God just say, actually, they love me, they'll do the right thing. And when we do the wrong thing, God says, okay, well, cover it up, give them another chance. Why does there have to be consequences to our choices? God is all powerful. If he wanted, he can make it so there wasn't. Thank you.
With everything, there's sort of cause and effect. And therefore, when we choose to say to God, we don't want you in our lives, he doesn't force us. He steps back. And when he steps back, his protection is there if we want it. But when we say, no, Lord, we don't want your protection, we don't want you in our life, leave us alone, all he can do out of love is step back. And when he steps back, that's when the consequences, the enemy steps in, and therefore we have to reap the benefits of our actions. That's when we reap the benefits of our actions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Steve.
I'm not saying what Michelle just said, but I have a question to ask to that effect. If that's the case, then Job, he didn't ask God to step back, but we see the devil was allowed to reap havoc in his life. So how do we see the two now?
Good point. I've got an answer, but Andre has an answer first. And that actually harkens back to some points we've already made. But Andre.
On Steve's point about Job having done no wrong, Job was precisely part of the big picture because the devil accused God of protecting Job and Job only serving God for mercenary motives because God was blessing him and so forth. But in the bigger picture, when the devil came to heaven and said, well, I'm representing the earth, other worlds were represented there as well. And they were seeing the big picture where Job was being tried and he was still faithful despite all of what he went through. So it's all about the context and the fact that there's a bigger picture. It's not just you having this particular problem. There's a scenario which is far bigger, and we're just actors in this big controversy.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Good, Steve.
I fully agree, because when I read the Job story, I also realize that God chose to brag, if you like, in Job, because he knew Job. He knew that Job would come through for him. So he used Job as one of, his follower who will stick it through even if his life depends on it. And so it is not always one way. God may choose to brag in us and to put us through the crucible. And he expects us to stick it through even if our lives depend on it.
Absolutely. That's a real measure of faith and trust. And to that point, and I'll just add on something slight. In our marriage vows, we generally say things like through sickness and in health, for poor, for riches, things like that. We mention good and bad. Why do we do that? It's a pledge between you and God. So if we get that in the mic.
Yeah, a pledge between you and God.
Okay, absolutely. So, and even just pledging ourselves to the other person, why do we mention the good and the bad? What might it mean if we didn't, or if we didn't think that?
Yeah, in life, things are not sweet. It's bittersweet. It's going to be good and bad. There's not going to be just a 100% positive experience. You're going to have to accept good and bad. And that's the reality.
Thank you, Andre. And generally, no other points? I would just piggyback off that and say true commitment sticks around through the good and the bad. Lots of people can get hangers on. When things look great, people flock to you. And if all of your friends, you were just giving money all the time, you'll very quickly get a lot more friends because they want money. They don't really want you. So God was saying, this is what love and commitment looks like. Even when the bad things happen, you're wrong, Satan. He's not just here for the easy life. He's here because he loves me and because I love him. Okay, we're coming up to our wrapping up point. I'm going to read what I thought was a great quote in the lesson and then ask another question. It was Oswald Chambers. If the Spirit of God brings to your mind a word of the Lord that hurts you, you can be sure that there is something in you that he wants to hurt to the point of its death. And I thought that sounded quite decisive. It could sound, I don't know, almost, oof, that doesn't sound very nice. But I think that works very nicely with the next day, which talks about pruning. And pruning, we all know, even if you're not a gardener, pruning generally is to do with making plants look nice, also getting rid of dead bits that could harm the plant if you leave those bits there. Why does pruning or purification have to hurt at all? Because we talk about the pruning, and the pruning is just an analogy the lesson's author made up that is linked to the refiner's fire that God talks about quite a few times. He puts us through severe situations sometimes, allows us. Sometimes the devil brings it on, sometimes our choices bring it on, but God allows it. And he does it often to prune us or to refine us, to purify us, to put us through this tough situation so it come out better. Why does it have to hurt? Why can't that just be nice and easy?
May I?
Go ahead,
Because I think it is about letting go of what we have grown accustomed to and develop a measure of trust in. And we now have to let go of that. And so we are not always happy to do that, which we need to do.
There's a big word there, trust, to other people.
Also, the Bible says that the heart of a child, that evil clings to it, that it takes a rod to drive it away. But our parents may not discover all these impurities in our life, and somehow we grow with them. So it takes challenges like that for it to even come to light to you as an individual that you have this defect. They may lie inside us. We may cover them up in some cases, but sometimes they have to be revealed to our consciousness, and then we might begin to pay attention to either pray about them or to work against them. Something like anger. You might not know that anger dwells in you until something happens one day and you begin to get aware of it.
That was good. And in a nutshell, if I got that correct, you're saying sometimes the negatives reveal who we really are, and it's only through that we would know who we really are and where we have to get to. Okay, I believe Sister Sadler had a point.
Yeah, good to know Pearl knows about pruning and gardening. The pruning is a really good analogy because the Bible talks about that when you prune plants, you want them to develop into more. And so we know that like an apple tree, if you don't prune it, it just gets more and more apples, and then it actually starts to strangle. The apples start to strangle themselves, literally. And so there's something about of our abundance, we can just become more and more abundant, and we can think more of ourselves. We can become more of ourselves. And so that pruning has to necessarily take away, and no taking away that nice actually, but the more you prune hard, a gardener knows, and prune right, the better the result.
Okay.
So the analogy is about our faith.
Okay, thank you. Very insightful. And that would lead nicely into the final question. I don't know how many more minutes we have left. Finish. Okay, so we won't do that. I'll end on the memory verse is a great one. I'm going to end on, however, a quote that I think is quite poetic. Okay. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking about the house in a way that hurts abominably and doesn't seem like it makes any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one that you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. The reason for all our suffering is ultimately, aside from the fact that there is an enemy, is that God is making us into something that we ourselves don't even realize how grand it's going to be. And we have to push through the limitations of who we are and what we are in order to get there. But it's precisely because of his love that he wants us to be more than we are now, and that he wants us to be as he originally made us, which is in his image. Okay, thank you for taking part, everyone. And that ends today's study.
One Sabbath, 12-year-old Ariel heard a sermon that really made him think. The pastor had said that everyone should be involved in missionary work. Ariel liked the idea of being a missionary, but what could a 12-year-old boy in Bolivia do? Ariel began to pray and ask God to help him be a missionary. He began to look for people who might be interested in learning about Jesus. As he looked, he kept praying. He didn't have to look far. One day, he went with his parents and sister to visit another family. While there, he learned that the family was interested in the Bible. He offered to give them Bible studies, and they agreed. Ariel had never given Bible studies before, so he wasn't really sure what to do, but he found a set of Bible lessons and studied them with the family. It wasn't easy, especially the last few lessons, but he prayed for God to help him. Ariel wanted to give more Bible studies, so he invited his classmate, Hébert, to study the Bible with him. Hébert looked forward to each new lesson. When they finished studying, Hébert decided to give his life to Jesus and was baptized. Ariel was so happy. God was helping him be a missionary. He remembered his original prayer to be a missionary and decided to continue praying to see what God wanted from him next. Ariel has found that he can be a missionary in many ways. He studies the Sabbath school lesson every day so he can learn more about God. Whenever he earns some money, he sets aside 10% to return to God as tithe. And he also gladly gives some of the money as an offering. In everything that Ariel does, he wants to put God first. Even though Ariel is only 12, he has already led others to Jesus. No one is ever too young to be a missionary, he says. We can all be missionaries, sharing our love for God as we wait for him to take us to heaven. There is no Adventist church where Ariel lives. His family and others meet in one another's homes on Sabbath. It was in one of the church members' homes that Ariel heard the sermon that inspired him to become a missionary. Ariel's dream is for a church to open in his town one day. Part of this quarter's 13 Sabbath offering will help open a church near Ariel's town. Thank you for planning a generous offering so that more people can have a church where they can gather and share the good news that Jesus is coming soon.
I just want to welcome those of you who came just after we started Sabbath school. And the lesson that I learned from this week's study is each one of us will go through an extremely challenging time in life. No one is exempted, even we are Christians. But like that of Job, he said, even when he tried me, I will come forth as gold. I wish I have that kind of faith as him. And I hope you too, that we will be able to stand the trials that comes our way. Because the suffering in this life is nothing compared to the joy that we will have when we stand in the sea of glass in God's kingdom. So we must keep the faith and we stay connected with God. And we will not be defeated because of the cross. God's victory is our victory too. I just want to thank the people who take part in our program this morning. Our pianist all the way from Qatar, thank you for playing so beautifully. And also our praise team. We will few in numbers, but you sing beautifully that we fill up the big church with your voices. And I want to thank Brother Andre for willingly stepping in, doing the opening prayer, and Pelo for facilitating our lesson study, and also Brother Emmanuel as he's going to do the closing prayer. And I just want to remind us that we have a prayer, praise, and share every Wednesday evening from 7 to 8. So everyone is invited. And we will now have a closing song followed by prayer. Thank you.
closing hymn for this portion of worship.
Let's pray. Our dear Lord, we bless your name for putting it in our heart to gather at your presence to study your word. Dear Lord, at this time, the voice of men have ceased to speak to our souls. We humbly pray that the Holy Spirit may continue to speak to us, so that in all things our names will be written in the book of life. Dear Lord, in any way you are pruning us, in any way we are passing through crucibles for us to be purified, we pray that you give us the strength, the faith, and the grace to continue with you. In every way the devil has plans to separate us from you, we pray that your Holy Spirit may raise a standard against it. In all things may we grow from grace to grace, so that on that day when you appear in the class of heaven, we become partakers of the heavenly kingdom which you've gone to prepare for us. May this be the portion of everyone here whose head is bowed, and everyone who is not here but whose mind is here. We ask in faith in Jesus' name. Amen.
Roberts bringing you SCC News in 60 seconds. Last Sabbath, Woolston Church began its 3-week children-led evangelistic series. The opening speaker, Judah Hibbert from Emmanuel Church, preached on the series theme, Turning the World Upside Down. In the afternoon, Jaden Rose Campbell spoke on the topic, What are man's basic instructions before leaving Earth? Last Sabbath, volunteers from the Dunstable Church Plant and Luton Central and North Churches ran health and community service stalls at the annual St. Mary's Village Carnival in Edinburgh. The team held a health expo and operated food and clothing banks. The Hub Church Plant in Watford held its first Community Fun Day last Sunday at Hollywell Primary School. Its members engaged with approximately 500 local residents and community leaders who enjoyed live music, activities for children, and stalls providing free food and drink, health checks, and literature. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Happy Sabbath. So we're having our 5-minute spot today, and we're focusing on health. And we've come to W in our New Start acronym. So nutrition, exercise, and now we're talking about water. So in 2003, this book came out and caused a few little waves actually in the healthcare community. So it says, "You're not sick, you're thirsty." And this doctor had done a number of years' research and was able to pull together some evidence that others had also been working on, showing how actually water has a huge impact on our wider health, and many of the health symptoms that we suffer actually down to water intake or lack thereof. He's also got another book called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. So, anybody here thirsty? Okay. So in terms of our water percentages, there are some, it's not completely agreed across the board, okay? So when you have a look at this, you'll see there are some slight differences in what people say is the amount of water, but roughly speaking, as a tiny fetus, we might be about 90% water. When we're first born, 80%. As we age, that percentage of water goes down. So during childhood and adolescent years, probably around 70% water. Adult years, the figures vary, but it's probably at least 60-65% water. And as we get a bit older, that can go down into the 50s. But our organs have very different percentages of water, and some of those organs rely much more heavily on our water intake than others. So, for example, while the average female and the average male are slightly different percentage of water because of their muscle mass, our brains, 83% water. Our lungs, 85% water. Our eyes, 95% water. So water is actually vastly important for many of our body systems. Signs that we need to drink more water. Well, feeling thirsty, dry lips and mouth, changes in our urine, so darker color or smell, passing urine in smaller volumes or less than 4 times a day. Symptoms of feeling dizzy or maybe lightheaded or tiredness or maybe irritable. Lack of concentration. All of this can be signs that actually is not enough water. Headaches. There are certain conditions, whether it's environmental or physical conditions, that mean that we need even more water than the recommended amounts. Okay, so some of this is quite obvious. If we're in a warmer environment, we need more water. If we're doing increased activity, more water. If we've got a temperature or fever, if we are losing water, so through vomiting or diarrhea, for example, alcohol intake, if anyone's taking alcohol, they will need to be drinking a lot more water. Diabetes is not one that we often think about, but what's one of the, most common signs of diabetes? Do you know? Thirst, right? You start to feel thirsty. Why is that then? Dehydrated, yeah, true. Why do you need more water intake if you have diabetes? Why might you get... Yeah, so your blood has got a higher amount of sugar, and therefore the body's trying to flush out the sugar, and therefore it's using the water more. So you may pass more water, and you may need to be taking more water. Okay. And then there are certain medications such as diuretic water tablets, where actually, yes, they're designed to prevent the swelling of water in the wrong places, but it means you do need to increase your overall water intake, otherwise you can dehydrate more easily. Okay, moving swiftly through. The benefits of water. So many body systems will benefit from good water intake. Our joints, our saliva and mucus, which are vital for good oral health, but also for other organs like our eyes, like our lungs, where you need a thin, light mucus to help keep things lubricated. It helps in terms of getting the right amount of oxygen around the body through our circulation, boosts our skin, cushions the brain and the spinal cord, helps with healthy digestion, makes it easy to absorb vitamins and minerals, helps to flush out waste, helps with weight loss, helps with blood pressure, because if you're not having enough water intake, the blood gets slightly thicker, therefore the heart needs to use more pressure to keep that circulation going. Helps regulate body temperature. Sometimes we feel overheated when actually we don't need to. We just need to be drinking more water. Helps with airways. There's a lot of evidence now that drinking the right amount of water can help control asthma. Doesn't prevent, but help to control asthma and make it more easily under control, including allergies like hay fever. Helps with the kidneys, which should be no surprise. Reducing infections, reducing stones, reducing the rate of chronic kidney disease. So the kidneys can become under strain as time goes by, and the older we get, the more vulnerable our kidneys are, and therefore adequate water intake is vital for that. Helps to support cognitive function, our thinking, our brain skills. Helps to support physical activity and fight illness in general. Okay, I'm racing through, but here's some resources that you might find useful. www.nhs.uk, they've got a good section on there about dehydration, signs to look for, and things you can do to prevent it. The Scottish NHS website also has some really good information when it comes to hydration. That's www.nhsinform.scot. Okay, that's a Scottish NHS website. Lots of useful information. And are we aware of Juky Pines? Hopefully so. There's an Adventist institution in America. Their tagline here, improving health one choice at a time. They've got some great information. If you go to their website, that's www.jukypines.org. And it's not the easiest website to navigate, but if you click on this tab at the top that says counseling sheets, that's where you will find loads of information about all sorts of health conditions, but how to use water for hydrotherapy, how to use water in terms of how much intake you should be having, how to use water if you suffer from migraines, headaches, skin conditions, joint problems, all sorts of things. So really useful resource that we should take advantage of. Is that okay? Just before I sit down, how much water is in this bottle? So I'm hearing different figures. I heard it over here, 750 mils. This is 750 mils, okay? So that is just under a litre. Well, 3/4 of a litre. How much is in this bottle? Yeah, so this is 2.2 litres in here. Okay, so 2.2 litres in here. How much water should we be drinking? Yeah, so lots of varied responses, and actually the advice is varied. So the guidelines in the UK are different to America, and actually if you ask different experts, they'll tell you slightly different things. And really it does depend on your build, how active you are, whether you're in a warm environment or not. But you need really, in the UK, they will advise your minimum is 2 litres a day. 2 litres of water a day, which would be 8 tall glasses. But that's your minimum. That's not your target. That's your minimum. And so ideally, you want to be drinking even more than that. So unless you have a specific heart condition where your doctors have told you you need to be on fluid restriction, that's very few cases, but there are some. If that's the case, speak to your doctor. But otherwise, let's increase our water intake and protect our health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leanne, for informing and updating us regarding our health. I'd like just to add to that, and that is that as we know that COVID is on the rise again. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's B5, that particular variant or strain. So if it's possible, could we adhere to the health and safety protocols in the church, if possible? These are the announcements. I can tell you that the funeral of Sister Jane Fisher will be held at this particular church on Monday, the 18th of July at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m. And then there will be the committal at the Hendon Cemetery, Holders Hill, and the postal code there is NW71NB. I'll just repeat that. Sister Jane Fisher's funeral to be held on Monday, the 18th at 11 o'clock, and the committal will be at Hendon Cemetery, and the postal code there is Holders Hill Road, NW71NB. Then also, as a footnote, I'd like to say that I know that our members are very, they are diligent regarding their tithing, but there is a slight note in that Sister, I think it's Sister Judith, wants us to use the account ending in 7075. So if we return our tithes, we should return it to account 7075 and not to the other account that we used to use ending in 366. Just make sure that the account that you are going to submit your online tithing, it will be 7075 and not 366. Thank you so much. Then also, we have resumed the afternoon programs at 4 o'clock. And so next week, we will have the commencement of those afternoon services. It will be the religious liberty, and it will start at 4 p.m. sharp. 4 p.m. sharp. I can say that the other announcements remain the same. For example, Wednesday night prayer meeting, 7 or 8, and then we have our normal, I think it's Thursday morning from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. The others remain the same. Elder Steve would like to make another announcement. Elder Steve?
Yes. We should have a small amount of pictures overhead. Yes, there we go. And these pictures here are coming to us from the Extreme Teens Camp site, where will be taking place, I think, let me just get that up for you. So yes, it will be taking place on the 22nd to the 28th of August, which is not so far away, and it is in Cornwall. Brother Joshua Terelang has told us about this not so long ago, and we would like to encourage you, if you have any friends or anyone that would be interested in going on this camp. It is for 1 week, and we believe that it has a lot of activities that our youngsters would quite enjoy. And the time, I believe, is also allowing school and will be on break, and everything, I think, will be just right for the youngsters to go and take opportunity of this. So if you have anyone, family, friends, member, or maybe your own children that you believe would be benefiting from taking part in this, speak to myself or Joshua, and we will share with you further details of registering and cost and such like. Thank you very much.